Hi, everybody. Bonnie Baker here, and I wanted to just give you a quick little video on a couple of things that have recently happened with me. I had a situation where I had a lot of objections and problems in a closing that was going on under contract during the escrow time. It had everything that I could probably think of go wrong or have an issue. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about how important it is to work with the buyer and the seller in setting them up for the fact that there are many, many pieces in each and every transaction. So one of the things is on the buyer's side is if you're working with the buyer for the transaction to get to the closing, they have a lot of things they have to follow. And so one thing first to start off are the terms of the contract. So it's vitally important that as their realtor, you sit down and explain the contract, the time frames, the dates, when they need to get things done, and what it is that they need to get things done. It isn't our responsibility as the realtor to call their insurance company, for example, or to pick what inspection company they want to use. It is up to them to do that and to arrange for those things within the time frame. Now you might say, well, then I can't control when these people are going to come out, for example, and want to do their inspection. You can. So the way that I do that is I set that up with the buyer in advance. I tell them, here's a list of inspectors. And, some companies even have a list that's approved, and you can provide that to them. Or you need to also have your own vendor list that gives them lots of options that they can go to select their inspection company, insurance, people that are going to repair anything that you need. That vendor list should be available to them. So when you sit down to explain the contract, those dates that are inside of the contract, both for financing as well as inspections and moving towards closing, are really important. It's also important for them to understand that a closing date is not set in stone. It's a target date, is what I say. It's a target. We're going to work for a closing on such and such a date. There are so many factors that come in to the time period from the time you go under contract to closing that it's possible that something might delay that. It's important for them to know that and to understand. If they are concerned about that or they have questions about that, they shouldn't have them in the middle of the contract. They should have them before they actually make the offer and know and understand. Now we're there to guide them. That's our goal, is to help them to see when is the last date they need to do inspections. What is the last date they need to turn in a request for repairs? What is the last date that they need to go in and order their appraisal? All these things, we're there to guide them, and you need to reassure them of that. Okay, on the seller side, it's just as important on the seller side that they understand that when that contract goes into the closing and escrow department, that they are going to, in our state of Oklahoma, they have to actually find the abstract. So they're going to go in, they're going to find that abstract, and that takes a little while. It's not one day. It's 7 to 10 days. In my case, on my last situation, they couldn't find it. Period. Could not find it. And so they had to rebuild it. That meant another week to 2 weeks of getting that abstract document rebuilt. And in this state, unfortunately, you have to have the physical abstract to have a closing or to have it read, and an attorney has to put that together. So it's important that they find the abstract and that that's in. How do they know to do that except when you send in the contract to your closer? So if you wait for a week and you don't send it in, and then they can't find it, and there's another week, of course, that closing date is probably going to change because um, it's up to us to get this completed. The next thing is that they may have an appraisal that comes in at a different amount. We need to know when was the appraiser done? The listing agent here is the one that's got the MLS listing. The appraiser contacts them. They arrange for the not the buyer, but the appraiser to get in, and the buyer is not usually there. They're not usually informed. And the reason for that is they are informed that it is ordered, but that appraisal is an independent look at the property on behalf of the lender. It's for the lender to know, is this purchase price that we're basing our loan on, is it a value, the market value for this property? And that's what the appraiser's job is to do. The other thing the appraiser does is identify any items that might need repair or done as part of qualifying for a particular loan. So if an individual buyer is getting a VA loan, for example, the VA appraiser, which has to be that particular kind, he will go out and determine is the property in the condition that would be acceptable by the guidelines within that VA loan. Does it have peeling paint? Is there a handrail? There are questions that they're going to look at it and answer. And they may or may not have requirements. But as the listing agent, we are going to want to find out, are there any requirements the seller has to meet so that the buyer can utilize that VA loan? There are a lot of places along the contract, even up to the closing, where there are things that can happen that everybody has to work through. This last one I did, when they did the final gap check, the day of closing, a tax lien showed up from the Oklahoma Tax Commission. There was a tax lien on the property, and the lender said that has to be paid off. Was it a lot of money? No, like $575. So the buyer, though, had to go and get more money from the bank and bring it to the closing so that that tax lien could be paid off as part of the sale. There are always things that keep us on our toes, that we have to speak to both the buyer or the seller and negotiate, work around, figure out solutions, handle their objections for things, adjust. And sometimes our demeanor fixes all of it. I can tell you that in this particular case, I had some big things. And the appraisal came in at 10,000 less than the sales price. Worked with the seller. Seller agreed to go down to the 10,000 less. Then after we negotiated it, the agent for the buyer came back and said, whoops, I made a mistake. It wasn't this price, it was this price. And it was only $1,000 less, but it was another $1,000. And so I told the other agent, would the buyer consider paying the extra $1,000 rather than asking the seller, who's already gone down 10,000, to go down another? So we worked it out. Oh, then there was a requirement on the appraisal. Brand new stove, and they wanted it installed and working, and the appraiser had to come back and see that. So there's a fee for that. And so we had to figure out who was going to pay that fee. Buyer wanted that house, that kind of loan. So the buyer ended up paying that fee. And then the buyers had some financial situations. They had a 401k they were going to use money from. That 401k came in and they had about $4,000 less vested in their 401k than they thought. So they couldn't take out about 4,000 that they thought they were going to be able to, and that left them shy of what they needed. So they were going to have to wait for their paycheck. So we extended the closing. And when you go and talk to the seller and you tell them that, they say, what do you think they say? Well, they say, how come the lender didn't know that how come somebody didn't know that before the 3 days before closing? Yeah, that was 3 days before closing. So our demeanor makes a huge difference in the way we speak to people. When I spoke to the seller and told them they want it, they're closing, it just needs to be delayed. They have to get a paycheck to be able to make up the extra money. Then, a week into that, the other agent called me and said they can't come up with that much more money and still live. And I said, well, what do we need to do? And she said, I don't know. I don't know how to help them. I said, well, I do. We can each give a little bit on the commission. So we each gave $500 on the commission. Well, on the other side, between the two of us, that was $1,000 to give them. I had to call the seller and arrange for him to agree to a written agreement that said he would pay $1,000 of their closing costs, and I would charge $1,000 less on the commission. So it was a wash, and he was happy, but explaining that was something that I needed to do. When I did that, seller, great person, said, I'll put in $1,000. So let's make it $2,000 of their closing costs, and you can just reduce the commission 1,000 and we'll help them to get in. Wonderful person. So the demeanor, though, of the agent makes the world of difference. I was not upset. I did not say anything bad about anybody. I didn't speak poorly of the other agent or of the buyers. Just, gave the situation, and that worked out. So throughout this entire transaction, there was one thing after another that came up, and we did get it closed 2 weeks later than it was originally scheduled to do. But knowing and understanding how to handle and negotiate and handle the objections, have received a full commission. So other than the little bit that we took off the commission, I had already negotiated a full commission in anticipation that if there was something that needed to be negotiated, I could do that. And in addition to that, I collected the office transaction fee, which sometimes there's an objection to that. Had no objection. So I feel very fortunate that I've learned the skills of handling when people have objections. I would suggest that you sit down and you write the common objections that you've had. Probably one is, I don't want to pay that commission. Probably one is some objection about the house. Might even be one that says, I want to talk to the listing agent because I'll get a better deal. You need to talk about the different things that happen that you might have to handle an objection with. And then practice those. Practice, how am I going to tell people that I deserve a full commission? This is what I'm going to do. How do you handle that objection? And I feel like practicing that's really good. A suggestion I would make is if you've got a buddy in the office and you write down on cards the different objections and just practice how you would answer that. And maybe sit down together, spend 30 minutes going over different objection handling techniques that you have. One of my favorite ones is kind of cheesy. It is kind of cheesy, but like to show it just because it is kind of a cheesy thing. So I like to take a dollar bill. So I'm just gonna take this envelope and pretend I get a real dollar out of my purse usually. I've done it even with a 20. So one of the things that I do is I take this and I say, let me show you how the commission works. So when you pay a commission, Mr. Seller, 50% of that commission goes to the listing agent and 50% to the agent that brings the buyer. So you're really, when you ask me to reduce my commission, you're reducing, that's part of what you're reducing. Then before ever getting paid, I am going to pay for all the expenses involved in listing your property. And when I do get paid, I'm going to split this with my company. Oops, doesn't tear too well, but all right. So now I'm down to a quarter of a dollar bill. And I explained to them, then out of that quarter, I'm going to take out those expenses, and because you're not going to pay them, I am, pictures, photos, signs, everything that I'm going to do, I'm going to pay for, and I'm going to do it before you pay me. And then I am going to split this, and pay taxes, all that kind of stuff. So really, my portion of the dollar bill is this little corner. And I love this when you have a dollar because it only shows the corner of the dollar bill. I don't think it's legal to tear a dollar up, but I do it anyway and tape it back. And then I tell them, so no, I really can't reduce the commission because I would be reducing the amount that I actually am going to have to market your property along with what we offer to somebody who brings a buyer in a fair, competitive market. So I like the dollar bill thing. I use it all the time. Well, not all the time, but anytime somebody really asks me and I think they may not understand how commission works and I'm in a presentation, I will definitely show them the dollar bill. So you need some objections and objection handling techniques for those objections. So I'm going to suggest that you write them down. You figure out what you're going to say. If you have questions, that's what I'm here for. That's what coaching is about. So give me a call or talk to me on our next call, on our next coaching call, and I'd be happy to go over some of the good objection handling techniques. And I hope that you have a great day. Thank you so much.